Imagine holding a photograph, not just any photograph, but the very last image captured by someone moments before they vanish forever. What if you found a camera that held this secret, lost for years in the wilderness, and developed the film yourself? That's what happened to Liam. He stumbled upon a relic in the deep woods, and the final frame exposed on the film inside, it revealed something deeply unsettling, something lurking just beyond the edge of sight, captured in the final, frantic moments of a life about to be erased. This discovery wouldn't just solve a cold case, it would pull him into the heart of a chilling mystery that defied easy explanation, leaving him haunted by the image of what watches from the shadows. Liam Henderson wasn't inherently adventurous, not in the adrenaline junkie sense. His adventures were quieter, more deliberate. He craved the solace found far from the relentless pulse of city life, the oppressive glow of screens, and the sterile predictability of his graphic design job. He found refuge in the tangible, mechanical beauty of analog photography. For Liam, the process was as important as the result. The careful loading of a film canister in near darkness, the satisfying weight of his vintage Pentax Spotmatic in his hands, the manual adjustment of aperture and shutter speed, the decisive click echoing slightly in the quiet spaces he sought. It was a meditative ritual, a way to slow down time and truly see the world frame by frame. Digital felt too immediate, too forgiving. Film demanded patience, precision, and an acceptance of imperfection, much like navigating the wilderness he loved. His chosen sanctuary was Ashworth State Forest, a vast, sprawling territory known for its towering old-growth trees, labyrinthine trails, and pockets of almost preternatural silence. Locals regarded it with a mixture of awe and unease. Its beauty was undeniable, attracting hikers, birdwatchers, and solitude seekers like Liam. But Ashworth had a reputation. Cell service vanished a few miles in. Trails could become indistinct, leading the unwary into disorienting thickets or treacherous ravines. Weather shifted with startling speed, turning pleasant hikes into dangerous ordeals. And then there were the whispers, older stories, usually dismissed as folklore, about hikers who went in and never came out, about strange lights seen flickering deep within the woods at night, about certain areas where compasses spun erratically, and the air felt heavy, watchful. Liam, a city dweller at heart, treated these tales with pragmatic skepticism, but he always respected the forest's power. He packed meticulously, topographic maps, compass, GPS backup, ample water, first aid, waterproofs. He understood that preparedness was the price of admission to such wild places. The whispers, though, they added a subtle frisson, a layer of ancient mystery beneath the canopy. That autumn, a restlessness had settled deep within Liam. His usual routes felt too tame, too familiar. He yearned for deeper immersion, for landscapes untouched by weekend crowds. Consulting his maps, he traced a challenging route into the rarely explored northern sector, a region characterized by steep ridges and densely forested valleys, primarily known from outdated logging surveys. It promised the raw, untamed wilderness he craved. He packed a Spotmatic, several rolls of Ilford HP5 black and white film, and enough supplies for a demanding 12-hour loop. He left his detailed route plan with his roommate, a standard precaution, promising a check-in call by 10 p.m., assuming he found a patch of signal on a high ridge near the end. The air was sharp and cold as he left the car, the scent of pine needles and damp earth a welcome balm. He pushed past the main trailhead sign, heading onto a narrower, less maintained path that quickly dissolved into a mere suggestion among the trees. Within an hour, the sounds of civilization were completely gone, replaced by the crunch of his boots on fallen leaves, the occasional scolding chatter of a squirrel, and the profound quiet of the deep woods. This was it, the escape, the silence. He felt the tension in his shoulders ease, his focus narrow into the path ahead, the play of light to the canopy, the search for that perfect, fleeting composition. Hours passed. Liam moved steadily, navigating by map, compass, and the contours of the land. The terrain grew more difficult, forcing him to scramble over fallen logs slick with moss and push through thickets of mountain laurel. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy overhead, casting the forest floor in a perpetual twilight. He was deep in the heart of Ashworth now, miles from any marked trail, precisely where he wanted to be. He paused to check his map near a small, gurgling creek cutting through a narrow ravine, confirming his position. As he scanned the surroundings, searching for a landmark indicated on the map, a distinctively shaped rock outcrop, his eyes snagged on something unnatural. Half concealed beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient, upturned hemlock, partially buried under seasons of impacted leaves and forest debris, was a shape, dull, angular, distinctly man-made. It wasn't trash. It had a solidity, a specific form. Intrigued, Liam carefully climbed down the ravine bank, his boots dislodging loose soil. He knelt beside the hemlock roots, the air cool and damp in the shaded depression. He brushed away the packed leaves and dark, peaty soil. His fingers met cold, textured material, leatherette, peeling and cracked. Beneath it, metal, pitted with corrosion but still solid. He worked it free gently, pulling it from its earthen tomb. It was unmistakably a camera, a 35mm single-lens reflex. He turned it over, wiping away grime with his thumb. Despite the years of exposure, he could make out the faded branding. Pentax K1000, a legendary workhorse camera, popular from the mid-70s through the 90s. Simple, reliable, fully manual. Exactly the kind of camera a serious photographer might have carried into the backcountry. It was in rough shape, caked in mud, stained by moisture, the lens deeply scratched and clouded with grime. The strap had long since rotted away. Yet, the body itself felt surprisingly intact, likely protected by the overhang of the roots and the insulating layer of debris. Liam, his photographer's instincts kicking in, checked the mechanics out of habit. He tried the film advance lever. It was jammed solid, refusing to budge. This was significant. It usually meant one of two things: a mechanical failure, or the film inside was fully exposed, wound to the very last frame, unable to advance further. His pulse quickened slightly. He located the small rewind release button on the camera's base and pressed it. Then, he carefully unfolded the rewind crank on the top plate and turned it. It spun freely for a fraction of a second, then met firm resistance. Film. Definitely film. And judging by the stuck advance lever and the resistance on the rewind crank, it was an exposed roll. Someone had finished taking pictures right here, deep in this remote ravine, and then, somehow, the camera was lost or abandoned. Left here for how long? Years? Decades? A wave of intense curiosity, tinged with something else, a faint, inexplicable unease, washed over Liam. This wasn't just finding a lost item. This felt different. The remoteness of the location, the age of the camera. It felt like unearthing a time capsule. Who owned this camera? What were they doing so far off any trail? And what images lay dormant on that roll of film, preserved by sheer chance in the cold, damp earth? The K1000 felt unnaturally heavy in his hand, weighted not just by its metal construction, but by the profound mystery it contained. He carefully wrapped the camera in a spare microfiber cloth from his camera bag, tucking it securely into a side pocket of his backpack. His initial thought was purely technical. Could it be cleaned? Could the mechanism be salvaged? But a deeper, more compelling question echoed louder. What was on the film? The silence of the woods seemed to deepen around him, no longer entirely peaceful. The forest felt ancient, secretive. Finding the camera had pulled back a curtain, revealing a hidden layer to this wild place. The rest of his hike was subtly altered. Every shadow seemed deeper, every rustle potentially significant. The forest wasn't just background anymore. It felt like a silent witness holding its breath. The transition back to his brightly lit, overly warm apartment was always jarring after a day in Ashworth, but this time it felt particularly acute. The mud-caked Pentax K1000 sat on his workbench like an artifact from another world, starkly contrasted with his own meticulously maintained equipment. Handling it required care. He felt responsibility not just to the object, but to the potential story locked inside. His first priority was extracting the film without exposing it further. His bathroom doubled as a makeshift darkroom. Towels stuffed under the door, heavy blackout curtains taped over the small window. Under the dim, eerie glow of a red safe light, Liam worked slowly, his fingers surprisingly nimble despite the chill that had settled in the small space. The camera back was stiff, the seals degraded and crumbly, threatening to disintegrate. He gently pried it open, careful not to force anything. Nestled inside, looking remarkably preserved within the camera's core, was the film canister. He recognized the iconic design instantly, even faded and stained. Kodachrome 64. Liam drew a sharp breath. Kodachrome, a legendary slide film, famous for its rich colors and archival stability, but also infamous for its incredibly complex K-14 development process. Kodak had discontinued the film years ago, and the last dedicated lab capable of processing it had ceased operations in 2010. Developing this role wouldn't be easy or cheap. Only a tiny handful of specialist labs worldwide even attempted processing old Kodachrome now, often as a black and white negative due to the unavailability of the original color chemicals. The results were uncertain, the risk of damaging the aged emulsion high. He sat there in the dim red light, the canister cool in his palm. Was it worth it? The expense, the effort, the likelihood of getting back blank frames or images ruined by time and moisture. Yet, the mystery was potent, undeniable. The location, deep in that ravine. The age of the camera. The fact that the roll was finished. Someone had documented something right up until the moment the camera was lost. He couldn't just leave it undeveloped. He carefully sealed the canister in a light-tight black plastic bag, then placed that inside another. The decision solidified. He had to see what was on it. He spent the next hour researching online, finding a small, highly specialized lab in Kansas known for handling orphan films. Their website detailed the risks and the modified processes they used for Kodachrome. He filled out their online form, printed the shipping label, and wrote a brief, accompanying note explaining the circumstances of the find, discovered in Ashworth Forest, likely exposed decades ago. He packaged the canister with extreme care, cushioning it inside multiple layers, acutely aware of the fragile history it contained. Sending it off felt strangely significant, like posting a message in a bottle across time. Then came the waiting. The lab estimated a turnaround time of 6 to 8 weeks, possibly longer given the film's age and condition. Weeks crawled by. Liam tried to immerse himself in work, process the black and white shots from his own recent hike, but the found camera and its hidden images were a constant background in his thoughts. The curiosity began to morph into something closer to obsession. He found himself compulsively searching online archives, newspaper databases, forums dedicated to missing persons in the region. Ashworth Forest missing hiker. Unsolved disappearances Ashworth. He sifted through recent incidents, filtering by date, pushing further back into the past. He found scattered reports. Hikers rescued after days lost, unfortunate accidents. Then, a name surfaced repeatedly in older articles, dating back 15 years. Clara Hayes. Clara Hayes, age 22, art student at the State University. Reported missing in October, 15 years ago. She had told friends she was going for a day hike in Ashworth Forest, seeking inspiration for her photography portfolio. She was known to favor the less-traveled northern trails. She never returned. Search and rescue teams had scoured the area for weeks, finding no trace. Her car was located at one of the more remote trailheads accessing the northern sector. The articles mention her passion for nature photography, her adventurous spirit. Liam felt a jolt, a cold certainty crystallizing in his gut. He hunted for images, found one low-resolution newspaper photo accompanying a follow-up story a year after her disappearance. It showed a smiling young woman with bright, intelligent eyes holding up a 35mm camera, partly obscuring her face. The camera looked familiar. It was difficult to be certain from the grainy image. But the shape, the prism housing, it looked very much like a Pentax K1000. The timeline fit perfectly. The location, the remote northern sector where she was last known to be heading, the same area Liam had explored. Her documented passion for photography, the type of camera, the Kodachrome film, plausible for a photography student 15 years ago. Liam stared at the grainy photo of Clara, then looked at the aged K1000 still sitting on his workbench. It had to be hers. The realization shifted the weight of his discovery dramatically. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was potentially the last possession of a missing person, a tangible link to her final hours. The film inside wasn't just capturing landscapes. It was potentially capturing the last things Clara Hayes ever saw. The wait for the developed film became unbearable, charged with a mixture of dread and desperate hope. Would the images offer clues to what happened, or would they simply confirm her presence in that remote ravine, deepening the tragedy? He started having trouble sleeping, the silence of his apartment echoing the imagined silence of the deep woods where Clara vanished. The email notification chimed on a gray Tuesday morning, slicing to the mundane routine of Liam's workday. Subject: Dwayne's photo. Order update. Processing complete. Liam's breath hitched. His mouse pointer hovered over the link for a long moment before he clicked. It led to a secure online gallery. A brief note from the lab technician preceded the images, recovered 28 exposures from the Kodachrome roll. Significant degradation present due to age and likely moisture exposure. Color shifts, density loss, and motion damage evident on several frames. Some frames were completely unsalvageable blank/black. Processed as black and white negatives due to K14 discontinuation, then digitally inverted and color-corrected were possible based on remaining dye layers. Quality varies greatly frame by frame. Liam scrolled down, his heart pounding. 28 frames. Not a full roll, but far more than he dare hope for. He clicked on the thumbnail for frame 01. The image resolved on his screen. A slightly soft-focus shot of tall pine trees, their trunks catching angled afternoon sunlight. The colors were muted, shifted toward magenta and cyan, giving the scene a dreamlike, almost surreal quality. Classic Kodachrome look, filtered through time and decay. Frame 02, a close-up of vibrant red bunchberries against dark green moss. Frame 03, a wider shot of creek he'd recognized, tumbling over smooth gray rocks. Frame 04, an interesting abstract composition of peeling birch bark. Liam recognized the eye of a fellow photographer exploring the textures and details of the forest. He clicked faster now. Frame 05, a selfie. He leaned closer. A young woman's face, partially shadowed, hair slightly messy from hiking. She was looking directly at the lens, a tentative, thoughtful expression on her face, maybe testing the light or focus. Despite the color shifts and slight softness, it was unmistakably her. Clara Hayes. Seeing her face, captured by her own hand, staring back at him across 15 years, was profoundly jarring. It made the abstract news reports intensely personal. This was real. She was here. He continued through the gallery, each click revealing another fragment of her journey. Frame 06. Her small blue backpacking tent pitched in a small clearing, bathed in late afternoon light. Frame 07. A shot of her worn hiking boots propped on a log, campfire smoke curling up in the background. She must have camped overnight, pushing deeper than a simple day hike. Frame 08. Animal tracks, deer, perhaps, pressed into mud near the creek bed. Frame 09 through 18 were more landscapes, majestic trees, filtered sunlight, misty valleys. Beautiful, evocative shots showcasing her talent. But Liam scrutinized each one, looking for anything unusual, any background detail that might offer a clue. He noticed a light changing subtly through the sequence, suggesting time passing, maybe the weather turning overcast. Around frame 19, the compositions began to feel slightly different, less composed, perhaps captured more quickly. A shot of a dense, almost impenetrable thicket of rhododendron felt claustrophobic. Frame 22 showed a dramatic sky through the treetops, dark clouds gathering. An undeniable sense of isolation started to permeate the images, replacing the earlier feeling of peaceful exploration. Liam felt a growing sense of unease, like watching a slow-motion prelude to disaster. He cross-referenced identifiable landmarks. A unique waterfall in frame 12, a distinctive split-trunk oak in frame 20, with his own topographic maps and GPS logs from his hike. He could pinpoint her location with reasonable accuracy throughout the roll. She had indeed followed a path deeper and deeper into that remote northern valley, eventually reaching the vicinity of the ravine where he found the camera. Frame 26 stopped him. It wasn't a landscape. It was aimed directly down at the forest floor. In the center of the frame, nestled among some moss and fallen leaves, was a small, deliberate arrangement. 3 smooth, gray stones placed in a tight triangle, with 2 short, broken twigs laid carefully across the top, forming an X. It looked intentional, too symmetrical to be natural. A marker? A symbol? It seemed strangely out of place, a moment of cryptic signaling amidst a nature photography. Liam stared at it, baffled. What did it mean? Who was it for? It added another layer of strangeness to the sequence. Only 2 frames remained. Liam hesitated, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He was nearing the end of Clara's documented journey, the end of the roll, the point where she took her last pictures before the camera fell silent. What had she seen? What compelled her to use those final precious exposures? He forced himself to click. Frame 27. Another landscape, but the mood was starkly different, taken from a lower angle, looking up through tangled branches towards a darkening sky. The feeling was oppressive, enclosed. The forest seemed to be closing in. The light was significantly dimmer, suggesting either deep twilight or heavy, storm-like overcast. There was a palpable tension in the frame, a sense of being watched. It was subtle, conveyed through composition and light, but unmistakable to Liam. His hand felt clammy on the mouse. 1 frame left. The last exposure. Frame 28. He clicked. The image loaded more slowly than the others, perhaps due to file size or his own heightened perception. It flickered, then resolved. Liam inhaled sharply, leaning so close his nose almost touched the screen. It was jarringly different from all the others. The image was noticeably shaky, blurred from camera movement. The focus was soft, indistinct. The angle was low, tilted upwards as if the camera was held hastily at waist level or perhaps even dropped right after the shutter fired. It depicted the dense undergrowth of the ravine slope. Ferns, shadows, the dark vertical lines of tree trunks receding into deeper gloom. And there, position maybe 15, 20 yards away, partially obscured by a thick clump of shoulder-high ferns and the thin trunks of young saplings, stood a figure. Liam's blood ran cold. He zoomed in, the image pixelating, degrading further, but the shape remained stubbornly there. It was humanoid in basic form, but disturbingly tall and thin. Its outline was blurred, indistinct, blending almost seamlessly with the surrounding shadows and foliage. It seemed to be wearing dark, drab clothing, or perhaps its surface simply absorbed the light. No discernible features were visible. No face, no hands, just a vaguely defined head atop a slender torso, turned slightly, angled almost directly toward the camera's position, toward where Clara must have stood. Its posture seemed unnaturally stiff, static. It wasn't an animal. The proportions were wrong. It wasn't just a trick of light and shadow, although the poor quality begged for such a rational explanation. But the presence in the photo felt undeniable, malevolent. A silent observer in the deep woods. The full horror of the implication washed over Liam. This was the last picture. Clara hadn't been photographing the scenery. In her final moments, perhaps hearing something turning, she had raised her camera in haste, in fear, and captured this silent watcher. Then, Presumably, the camera was dropped or lost in whatever happened next. Did she run? Was she confronted? Did this figure approach her? The blurry photograph offered no answers, only terrifying questions. It was the only witness to Clara Hayes' final moments, a 15-year-old fragment of terror preserved on Kodachrome film. Liam stared at the figure, unable to look away, the pixels swimming before his eyes. It felt like it was staring back, an inscrutable shape born of shadow and fear, holding the key to a disappearance that had just become infinitely more disturbing. The forest secrets weren't just about getting lost. They were about what you might find waiting there. Sleep became impossible. The image of the figure, tall, thin, indistinct, watching, was seared into Liam's mind. Every creak of his apartment building, every shadow in the corner of his eye, seemed to echo that final, terrifying frame. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even miles away from Ashworth Forest, surrounded by the mundane safety of the city, rational explanations warred with the visceral chill the photo induced. Pareidolia? A strangely shaped tree stump? Another hiker distorted by blur and shadow? He tried to convince himself, but the context, the finished role, the remote location, Clara's disappearance, made dismissal feel like willful ignorance. The photo felt like proof, however ambiguous. Proof of something. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had to go back. Not for photos this time, not for escape. He needed to stand in that exact spot again, armed with the knowledge of Clara's final image. He needed to see the ravine through the lens of her fear. Maybe seeing the location again would provide context, make the figure seem less sinister, reveal it as a trick of light. Or maybe it would confirm his deepest fears. The thought was terrifying, yet inaction felt worse. He printed frame 28 in high resolution, along with several of Clara's earlier shots showing recognizable landmarks leading to the ravine. He spent an evening meticulously preparing, checking gear with an almost obsessive focus. Compass, GPS with extra batteries, a powerful flashlight, even though he planned a daylight trip, a personal locator beacon, first aid kit, his own high-resolution digital camera with a telephoto lens. He packed more water and food than strictly necessary. This time, the forest felt less like a sanctuary and more like hostile territory. He left a detailed plan with his roommate, including copies of Clara's key photos and the exact GPS coordinates of the ravine, establishing strict check-in times. If he missed one, his roommate was to call the authorities immediately. No chances taken. The drive back to Ashworth felt different. The familiar winding roads leading into the park seemed ominous. The vibrant autumn foliage looked less beautiful, more like a deceptive facade hiding something dark. Parking at the same remote trailhead Clara had likely used, the air felt colder, heavier. As he stepped onto the overgrown path leading into the northern sector, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was charged, expectant. Every snapped twig underfoot sounded unnaturally loud. Every gust of wind whispering through the pines seemed to carry a warning. He moved with heightened awareness, constantly scanning the trees, his hand hovering near the canister of bear spray clipped to his belt, though he doubted it would help against the source of his fear. He navigated using Clara's photos as a guide, recognizing a distinctive gnarled oak from frame 15, the mossy creek bank from frame 21. It felt like walking in her footsteps, 15 years delayed. The closer he got to the ravine, the stronger the sense of unease grew, prickling the back of his neck. He finally reached the edge of the steep decline, leading down to the creek. Below lay the cluster of boulders, the fallen hemlock with its exposed roots, the place where he found a camera. It looked ordinary enough in the dappled midday light. Yet, knowing what Clara's last photo showed, the ordinariness felt like a lie. He took a deep breath and carefully made his way down the slope, his boots slipping slightly on the loose earth. He stood near the hemlock roots, pulling out the print of frame 28. He oriented himself, matching the trees and rocks in the photo to the scene before him. He identified the spot where Clara must have stood, near a small cluster of ferns just yards away. He walked over to it, his heart pounding a heavy rhythm against his ribs. He raised his own camera, framing the shot, trying to replicate the low, shaky angle from Clara's photo. He looked through the viewfinder toward the spot where the figure had stood, that patch of dense ferns and saplings on the opposite bank, about 20 yards distant. And then it happened. The air grew still, utterly, unnaturally still. The gentle breeze vanished. The chirping of unseen birds abruptly ceased. Even the murmur of the nearby creek seemed to fade into an oppressive, ringing silence. A sudden, inexplicable cold descended on the hollow, far colder than the ambient air temperature, raising goosebumps sharply on his arms despite his layers of clothing. He felt it, an intense, focused pressure, the unmistakable, visceral sensation of being watched, not by an animal hiding in the brush, but by something unseen, aware, and radiating a profound sense of wrongness. His gaze snapped towards a spot from the photograph. Nothing, just tangled undergrowth, deep shadows between the trees. But the shadows seemed deeper than they should be, less natural, coalescing in ways that tricked the eye, suggesting vertical forms, hinting at the tall, slender shape burned into his memory. Was it just his mind, primed by the photograph and the suffocating silence? Or was it there, just beyond the threshold of clear sight, observing him? A sudden, sharp snap of a twig echoed from deeper within the woods to his right, startlingly loud in the silence. Liam spun around, his camera nearly falling from his trembling hands. He scanned the dense trees, peering into the shadows. Nothing moved. Only the silent, ancient trees stood impassive. But the feeling of being watched intensified, now seeming to come from multiple directions, pressing in on him. His breathing grew shallow, ragged. Panic began to claw at the edges of his mind. He forced himself to look down, scan the ground around Clara's presumed position, desperate for any other sign, any anchor to reality. And then he saw it, partially hidden beneath a clump of dead leaves near the base of a moss-covered boulder. Something small glinted faintly. He knelt, his fingers numb with cold and adrenaline, and carefully brushed away the leaves. It was a button, a small metal tack button, heavily corroded, the kind used on denim jackets or canvas bags. The metal was dark, pitted, almost eaten away by time and moisture. But the shape was undeniable. It looked ancient, like it had been lying there for, well, perhaps 15 years. He couldn't prove it was Clara's. It was too generic, too decayed. But finding it right here, in this precise spot, charged with so much fear and mystery, it felt like a final, small confirmation. A tiny piece of her, left behind in the place where she took her last photograph. The oppressive silence held. The feeling of unseen eyes intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Liam felt a primal urge to flee, an overwhelming instinct screaming at him to get out of the hollow, out of the woods, now. He didn't need to see the figure clearly. He didn't need absolute proof. The weight of the place, the suffocating silence, the tangible sense of a hostile presence. It was enough. He shoved the corroded button carefully into a small evidence bag he'd brought, scrambled back up the ravine slope without looking back, and began moving swiftly, almost running, back the way he came, relying solely on his GPS, casting frantic glances over his shoulder until the oppressive stillness finally gave way to the normal sounds of forest miles later. Liam didn't stop until he reached his car, fumbling with the keys, his hands still shaking. The drive back to the city was a blur, the chilling silence of the ravine replaced by the roar of the highway. Yet the feeling of unease lingered like a physical residue. He knew he couldn't simply file this away. The next morning, looking pale and sleep-deprived, he walked into the county sheriff's department. He asked to speak to someone about a cold case, the disappearance of Clara Hayes. He was eventually led to the desk of Detective Miller, the same man, now older and grayer, who had been peripherally involved in the original investigation 15 years ago. Liam laid everything out. The story of finding the camera, the complex process of developing the Kodachrome, the print of the photos, focusing on the unsettling final frame, and finally, the corroded button he found on his return trip, carefully placed in its evidence bag. Miller listened patiently, his expression a mixture of professional skepticism and undeniable intrigue. He examined the aged K-1000, nodding slowly. He studied the photographs, lingering on frame 28, his brow furrowed. He admitted the discovery was unusual, compelling even. He confirmed the camera was consistent with what Clara might have carried, and that the location aligned with the last known search areas. He took Liam's detailed statement, officially logged the camera, prints, and button as new evidence, and assured Liam he would reopen the file, cross-reference the photos with old case notes and search grids. However, Miller was also frank. The photograph, while disturbing, was far too ambiguous to be conclusive evidence of foul play, let alone identify a suspect or even confirm the nature of the figure. "It could be anything, son," Miller had said tiredly. "Shadows play tricks. Fear plays tricks. Could be another hiker in the distance, distorted by motion blur. Could be a stump after 15 years. He trailed off, the implication clear. The button, similarly, was circumstantial at best. Without more, it was just another strange element in a case file already full of dead ends. The investigation was technically reopened, but with no new actionable leads emerging from the photos or the button, it quickly stalled, relegated once more to the cold case archives. For Liam, there was no closure. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt violated and menacing. He never went back to Ashworth. He couldn't bring himself to hike alone anywhere for a long time. He spent hours staring at the digital copy of frame 28 on his computer, trying different filters, enhancements, desperately seeking clarity in the pixels that wasn't there. The figure remained an enigma, a blur of shadow and suggestion. Sometimes, late at night, staring at the image, he felt a faint echo of that same chilling sensation he'd experienced in the ravine, the feeling of being watched. He eventually put the print away, tried to move on, but the story remained lodged in his mind. The mystery of Clara Hayes remained unsolved, her fate unknown. Her final photograph served as a haunting testament, a grainy, terrifying glimpse into the unknown that waited in the deep, silent places of the world. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the most disturbing truths are the ones that remain forever out of focus, lurking just beyond the edge of our understanding, captured only in the last, shaky frame before everything goes dark.